A to the K.
to the K.
To the K.
Hello, one and all. Welcome to the A to the K Wrestling Show, where today we've got what everybody wants, what everybody needs, because joining us is the one and only Al Snow. Al, thanks so much for joining us, man. How are you?
Thank you guys very much for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
So what I'd like to do, if we could, is we'd like to start off sort of going way back to when you actually got into the business, which I believe was back in 1982. So I believe you wrestled for over a decade on the independent scene, which earned you the nickname the best kept secret in wrestling. So first, I'd just like to ask is sort of how the sort of journey to the WWF came about, and sort of I suppose what took so long to get into the sort of public eye, into the WWF.
Well, I was in the. I love how people seem to think that nothing else existed besides WWF. I hate to break it to everybody, but there was a wrestling business long before WWF. Actual vibrant, flourishing. I tell the story all the time. Like in 1961, Pat O'Connor and Buddy Rogers drew 43,000 people at Kaminsky Park on a Friday night. So, there were huge events and huge audiences that took place long before WrestleMania existed. I did start in 1982. I wasn't on the independent scene. I was actually started my career in the territories.
Apologies, yeah.
Yeah, those were regional offices, and they weren't considered independents at that time. They were considered outlaws if you weren't a part of an association of promoters. If you worked for them, it became the independents because the predominant promotions were really in the late 80s, early 90s became NWA or World Championship Wrestling, and WWF, and then everybody else was basically an independent, meaning that they didn't associate with any other group or organization of promoters. So that's where the term indie became from, or independence came from. But independence didn't really develop until probably truly the early 90s. I'd say probably 88, 89, and then going from that point on. So, it was, it's the reason I clarify that is because it's funny you brought, you were talking about that and the public eye of WWF. I was in the public eye, not on necessarily a national level, but I was in the public eye. And I just love find the mindset fascinating, because I was talking to one of the kids in OVW a short time ago. We were talking about the fact that, I'd been wrestling for 12 or 14 years before I had gotten signed with WWF. And he was just like stunned. He's like, "Oh my God, took you that long to get signed?" I was like, yeah, because, I didn't get signed. That's what you did. You went and you worked, and you went from territory to territory. And, it just so happened that I finally went to New York to WWF. So it's interesting. The mindset is now that there is no other wrestling that exists other than WWF if you're wanting to be in the public eye.
Yeah.
And most of the young men and women that get into the wrestling business these days get in with the sole objective of a destination, which is, oh, I've got to make it to WWF, or, I didn't succeed. And I hope for them that they understand that they can still be quite successful and have a very wonderful career and without being, signed to WWF. Or, what's worse is when they get signed to WWF and they get released and they feel like their careers are now over, where quite honestly, there are numerous examples in recent history that's far from the case. Drew McIntyre is a great example of that.
Yeah.
Cody Rhodes,
Yeah.
Soraya is a great, Paige is a great example of that. John Moxley, there are lots of people that get signed, released, and then, still have a career, still go on to bigger and better things. So
yeah, kind of just a start for them as opposed to
yeah. And it should be really, because quite honestly, a wrestling promotion is nothing more than a platform that allows the talent to sell their product. And if they use it correctly, if they capitalize on it while they're there, then they've just created actually a career for themselves, as opposed to the careers coming to an end once they've been released. So I started in 1982, and I was worked in the territories and everything. Started out like everyone primarily started out back then, and that was working the opening matches on live events, and basically being a job guy at TV, and just working my way through and earning my way into the wrestling business, into the locker room, and then therefore onto the card. And I've loved it. I've been blessed. I've been getting to do what I love to do for a very long time, and nobody's yet to figure out that I don't have a clue of what I'm doing.
Love it. So it was around 1995 that you actually decided to go to Smoky Mountain, where obviously you were the junior heavyweight champ, and also you spent time in the tag scene. So you won tag titles with who we came to know as Kane. So just wondering what it was like teaming with Glenn and your time in Smoky Mountain.
It was great memories. What a great opportunity. That opportunity led to meeting Eric Bischoff and Eric wanting me to come to Atlanta. The very next week, I went to New York and sat down with Vince McMahon, and he offered me a contract, and so I wouldn't have had those opportunities with either place if it hadn't been for my opportunity with Smoky Mountain Wrestling. And I had a great time. My experience with Glenn was fantastic. Glenn's such an awesome person, and was a terrific partner. It gave us a chance for both of us to step up our game and to learn from two of the best. And when we were in a program with Ricky Morton and Robert Gibson, and on a regular basis, 4 or 5 nights a week. I apologize, I got a bit of a sinus thing today. It was just really, honestly, a wonderful experience all the way around, being involved in Smoky Mountain at that time.
Awesome. That's awesome. Yeah. So obviously both you and Kane would go on to be noticed by the WWF, and you would actually go on to debut as Avatar, which I believe kind of fed into the sort of Power Rangers popularity at the time. So I just sort of wanted to ask is sort of whose idea that gimmick was, and what your thoughts were on the sort of gimmick and the character of Avatar.
Well, it was Vince McMahon's idea. I think he really wanted to capitalize, like you said, on the Power Rangers and the Mortal Kombat craze that was going on. I know he had at that time, was when we had a conversation about it, was telling me about how New York City Radio Music Hall, New York City's Radio Music Hall, they had Mortal Kombat had sold out like 3 weeks in a row or something like that, and that was kind of unheard of at the time. And so he was really hoping, because I know he had tried, that was why he had tried to utilize Pete Polacco, Just Incredible as Aldo Montoya in that outfit. I know he had, he had used Quang, Savio Vega. So he was trying to, catch something and capitalize on that craze at the time. And if I knew then what I know now, I'm sure I could have done a lot more with the opportunity than what I had done. But it was things were meant to be the way they were meant to be. I made mistakes and didn't fully take advantage of the opportunity that was presented to me. It was a bit of a challenge. I mean, with a very unique thing of not wearing the mask out, putting the mask on, and then wearing it. But now when I look back, there are a lot of things and ways that I could have done that differently than what I had actually done. So,
I think as well, what was fascinating, we also saw very briefly you as a Shinobi, which we know that you'd used prior to joining the WWF at the time. Was there ever, you talk about ninjas and Mortal Kombat and stuff, was that the next plan, was to push kind of Shinobi as a character, or was that always intended to be kind of a one-off?
I don't really know. I was never privy with that conversation. I do know that the last time that I used Shinobi, which was an idea that they had with when Coach was doing an angle and they wanted me to work with Tajiri. The writers were insistent upon me unmasking after the match, and I kept debating with them. I'm like, it doesn't make any sense. Why would I, you unmask me? That doesn't do anything. And they kept pressing him for it, and I was like, well, okay, I'll do it. And the very next day, Vince walked up to me and he goes, wow, pal, that was the best match I've ever seen you have, and why haven't we done that gimmick before? And I said, we have, and he didn't remember. And and he said, oh, it's just a shame you took the mask off. And I was like, I told the writers that I shouldn't take the mask off, and he, but it was, I should have stood my ground and I shouldn't have taken the mask off. And that was my mistake again too, was, just going along and being agreeable and not resisting that idea.
Yeah.
So obviously after the Avatar and Shinobi, you went on to become one half of the New Rockers with Marty Jannetty as Leif Cassidy. So I just wondered what it was like working with Marty and sort of what Sean's reaction was to bringing back the Rockers.
Well, Sean didn't, I don't think he had any issue with it. In fact, I think Sean was supporting the idea, to give Marty another opportunity, and
of course,
and myself, and Marty was great. I mean, I've said in numerous interviews that I think that Marty is truly underappreciated and undervalued as far as his talent. Everybody, you don't want to be the Marty Jannetty thing. Listen, I would love to be the Marty Jannetty of the team. Marty was very, very adept, was very, very good, and actually was very instrumental in teaching Sean a lot of what you see Sean do, in the ring. The fact that there's this bias that's created by this misperception by people that have never done it is sad, that he doesn't get the respect or the appreciation that he really truly deserves. It's just too bad. If you really go back and you watch Marty Jannetty and you watch the Rockers, you can see that he's every bit as much, if not more, of a performer than Shawn Michaels.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I suppose, as you say, that's the problem with the fan base. Obviously, they get to see the on-screen characters, they get to see Sean become the breakout star, but maybe you don't see the behind the scenes or the mechanics of it all quite the same way,
Yeah, some people are more, and this isn't a knock. This is actually, it's just part and parcel.
Of course, yeah.
Is that some people are more adept at the backstage things than or just as adept at the backstage workings as they are out in front of the camera. And some are really good out in front of the camera and aren't very good at the backstage maneuverings as much, which you have to be adept at both.
Yeah, absolutely. I think something obviously we saw on your Instagram, I think you actually put this caption, but something nobody had on their 2022 bingo card was the return of Leif Cassidy. What was it like reprising that character this year?
It was fun. It was just a gimmick that was done as because Marty could not make it because he had surgery done on his ankle, and they called me at the last minute and pitched the idea, and I was like, yeah, sure, I don't mind. In fact, again, I'm going to work twice this weekend in matches as Leif Cassidy again. So
that's awesome.
It's all just a gimmick. So who cares? I mean, it's fun. It's fun to do, and if people want to pay to see it, then so much the better. I'll do it.
Love it.
So, if people want to pay see Avatar again, I would go and do that. But
That's fair. So obviously it was around, I believe, 96, around the time of the New Rockers, that Wrestling Observer named you the most underrated for that year. What was your reaction to that?
Oh, well, anytime you get some kind of positive feedback, it's a compliment. But so what? I mean, so I got an award from a newsletter, and don't get me wrong, I mean, I'm very appreciative. I mean, that means that the fans took notice and liked what I was doing, and that's very very nice. But ultimately, I got into the wrestling business to make a living and to pursue a career. And, unfortunately, I hate to say it, but, as much as pleasant as it is to do those things, getting the most underrated wrestler of the year or a 5-star match, when I get a bill from my local utility company and I call them up and I go, hey guys, look, I can't pay my electric bill this month, but I did have a 5-star match. And they're going to go, what? You got a 5-star match? You know what? We'll let it slide. Okay. Don't worry about this month. Just call us up and let us know next month how you're doing, or if I go in the grocery store and on self-checkout, I just put up, I'm the most underrated wrestler of the year. Don't bother. Your money's no good here. The reason I say that is not, again, to discount the compliment. It's very pleasant compliment, but I think that too many performers these days are more focused on getting those types of things than they are being an actual attraction and drawing the interest of the fans and drawing money.
No, I'll take your point. It could be a distraction, or you kind of trying to earn that, like you say, that 5-star match or that underrated wrestler sort of credit.
Yeah, ultimately, are they going to pay to see you?
Correct, because that takes the focus off of your real objective, which is to motivate an audience. A wrestler is in competition for the most valuable resource on the face of the planet right now. It's worth more than anything else. It's worth more than gold. It's worth more than diamonds. And that's your attention. And companies and corporations and, politicians will spend millions upon millions of dollars to get it for even just 10 seconds.
Yeah.
So you've got to be aware that that's ultimately what you're really out there trying to do, is to capture someone's attention and capture it in such a manner that they're going to now be motivated to want to pay to see you again. And also, be motivated to buy your merchandise and, license products and which is going to give you opportunities to just do that again and again if you're successful at it. And you've got to be keenly aware that that is what you're doing. It's not about getting critical acclaim. It's nice. It's very pleasant. But if you can't maintain an audience's attention, you can get all the critical acclaim you want, and it's not going to achieve anything.
Harder than ever today as well, with attention spans the way they are. But where you obviously,
I don't buy that either. I don't buy that myth either. I think the attention span thing's complete utter bullshit. I think I think it's a crock of shit. You know why I think it's a crock of shit?
Well,
tell me some of the most successful television shows that have been airing television wise or streaming. Okay, Game of Thrones, Walking Dead,
Stranger
Things, Breaking Bad. Tell me you have to pay attention to each and every episode.
Yeah, that's right.
And that I think the attention span is a crock of shit, and it's an excuse for lazy participation. That's all it is.
It's probably more like it's probably easier distractions today, isn't there? As you're trying to watch the TV, but then you've got your phone or you've got.
But let's be honest. If you're watching one of those shows and it's a really good show, you don't pay attention to it.
No, it's a fair point.
Yeah, that's the difference.
Yeah, that's the difference. But then it's easy for you to fall back and say, oh, well, the attention span, because it's easy to insult your audience's intelligence than it is to take responsibility for your lack of generating something that's going to keep their interest.
Yeah, that's a really good take, actually. Fair play. But something you absolutely, definitely did in 1997 was capture people's attention when you created the Al Snow persona, and it's something which I don't think, there's many been able to replicate the success of that to this day. It was so, intriguing to see that character with head and all that kind of thing, with the help being written backwards on the forehead. How did you kind of put all that together into the package that became Al Snow?
I just, at the time I was was very frustrated because I'd been wrestling for, I had a long career at that point, very significant. And I'd had success, maybe not in the terms of the way people term it now, because I think a lot of people mistake fame for success. And, I've always done well. There are times I've made less money and there have been times I've made more money, but I've always done well. And I've been able to do this and nothing else for, 40 years now. So I think in that sense, I think I've done okay. And I had just came off of a really strong run in Smoky Mountain, came to WWF and was, I can attest that this was because I didn't have a definable, describable persona in the ring, and they were trying to find it. And, and I made the mistake of doing what a lot of people do, and that is pointing the finger at everyone else and not at myself. And I realized once I started pointing the finger at myself that I was the only one that I could control. And then I was the only one that could change it, that could make a difference. So I set about, I tried to quit because I had a contract for 2 years at that time. And little did I know that they had I failed to realize that they had a extension that they could hold me over for another year. So I'd sent in my release and request for a release, and they turned it down and ruled me over. And just fortunate for me, I was friends with Chris Candido, who was at the time was kind of Paul Hammond's right hand man, and Chris came to TV. We had a conversation. He went to Paul went to Bruce, who was in charge of talent relations at the time. And then I was put on loan in ECW, and I went there specifically with the idea that I was going to make myself a star, to where either Paul would pay to keep me, Eric would pay to steal me, or WWF Vince would pay to bring me back. And I totally went there with that idea in mind. And the thing that happened is that I created a describable, definable character, someone that you could relate to and someone that you could believe in. And the reason that you could believe in it was because all of that frustration, all of that anger that I had felt, all that resentment, I channeled through the head. I talked to it and, made remarks and comments, and it felt and seemed, and people believed that it was real. And so much so that, if you'd have at that time had done a poll of 9 out of 10 people, they would have sworn that, 9 out of 10 people would have sworn I was completely insane. So, which is good. That's the key to success, is that, an audience has to believe in who you are. Yeah. And you have to have a describable character in order to be a star. You've got to, the fans have to be able to turn to their friends and family and go, you got to watch a show. There's this guy and he's A, B, C, D, E. If you cannot describe that character in that succinct fashion, they're not going to be successful. Simple as that. And that was, there were times where I had more success in my career, and the more success I had in my career was because of the fact that I was more of a describable, definable character in that ring. Because at the end of the day, whether it's pro wrestling or if it's, you name it, soccer, etc., go down the list of sporting events now, everyone has realized what we've always realized in professional wrestling. And that is that you no longer sell what you do, you sell who you are and why you're doing it. What's at stake? What's the gravity and the consequence of that win and loss? And, without that who, then the gravity and consequence is not as relatable or as personable. And therefore it doesn't motivate people to want to buy tickets. So, that was a very, very significant factor that played in the success that I had in ECW that led me back to WWE.
Amazing. So obviously, talking of you coming back to WWE, you obviously became synonymous with the hardcore title, having the fourth longest reign as champ. So I just wondered, sort of, in terms of sort of how the hardcore division worked at the time, and obviously it's something you've tried to recapture since. Like, how did you find the hardcore division and that sort of style? I suppose that fast-paced element of it.
Oh, it was fine. You know, I just still attempting to try to do within the context of what I was in, telling the story every match. And, you know, because of the fact that through an accident in Worcester, Massachusetts, in the middle of winter, you know, Road Dogg and I were having a hardcore match, and we ended up going out a fire door and out into the middle of outside the building in the middle of a snowstorm. And, you know, every match after that, they were always like, you know, always wanted me to find some way to go outside of the building or go somewhere else. And so, you know, that, you know, ended up with in Minneapolis, Minnesota, Bossman and I having a bar fight across the street, you know, literally fighting across a public street in downtown Minneapolis. Bob Holly and I ended up in the Mississippi River, you know, Memphis. A lot of interesting places. Yeah. So, and I enjoyed, you know, enjoyed it. It was a great run. And, you know, I was very grateful for the opportunity, and it allowed me to carve out a unique niche on the card and in the show, because, you know, it allowed me to be different and not to be like every other match on the show, you know, or not exactly. To be like every other character on the show. And that's what you really are wanting to do, is to stand out, you know, on a show where everyone on the show is trying to stand out. You know, that becomes quite a bit of a challenge. So,
Speaking of standing out, I was going to say one of the things from that around about that time was you actually had a match against yourself, which is perfectly fitting for your character. And obviously, like, we've seen it in other companies and stuff, the minute, like, you know, fighting Invisible Men or like putting like the grenade down the pants and stuff like that. But for its time, you know, this was something that was completely.
Well, I think what I did was different than the things that you're talking about, the grenade. And Invisible Man and, you know, things like that, because you have to understand, for the audience, you know, me wrestling myself or me wrestling the head matched my psychosis.
It made sense.
When somebody does these things and just does them out of context to basically make it a joke of what it is we're trying to sell to an audience, I think that's detrimental. And you know, and people are going to say, well, you did it, you know. But again, I did it within the context of the character. You know, that for an audience that had seen me week in, week out. And that was, you know, everybody goes, oh, I was a comedy wrestler. I was not a comedy wrestler. There's no such thing as a comedy wrestler. I was entertaining, but I was insane, and which allowed me to do the ridiculous that for anyone else wouldn't have made any sense. But for an audience to watch me do it, they completely seemed justifiable because I was out of my mind. So, you know, within context, there's a really big difference between just going out there to entertain yourself or the boys in the back and making a joke of things, or going out there and doing something that for an audience, they go, oh yeah, well, that makes sense. He's completely a loon, you know?
So obviously, being two Brits, we hold a bit of a soft spot for the European Championship, which you won from Perry Saturn on an episode of SmackDown. So I just wondered sort of your thoughts on sort of how you felt about winning the title and your thoughts on the European title scene.
Well, I did, you know, again, when you win a title, let's clear a couple things up. One,
of course,
it's a gimmick. I mean, it's a prop, you know, but at the same time, it's not just a gimmick and a prop to a wrestler, because it's a sign that they're entrusting you a responsibility, which means if they're going to give you a title, they're expecting that you're going to be able to draw with it. So, you know, So that's why I was given the title, and then that's a sign of respect, and I first, when they came to me with the idea of going out, because I recorded a bunch of, what does everybody want, what does everybody need, what does everybody love, in all these different languages, they were, I was pitched the idea of, you come out representing different countries in Europe, and I'm like, okay, and to be honest, the very first time I went out, I felt like a complete ass, but then I thought, what, if I'm going to be, this is going to be ridiculous, well, then I'm going to make it as ridiculous as possible. And what's always surprised me is the number of people over the years since who have came up to me and inevitably talk about, Tough Enough, or they talk about Head, or they talk about the European run and how much they enjoyed it and how entertained they were by it and how much fun they had watching it and how they wanted it to go longer, and I can't tell. It always surprises me just how many people talk about that. So, I made an impression and with the run and had a great time. And, like I said, they were like, well, you're going to come out and do all this, wear the outfit from, I think the first one was Germany, and I had to go out with lederhosen and the sausages around my neck and a picture of David Hasselhoff. And I was like, this is ridiculous. And then I thought, you know what? Okay, screw it. You want me to be, want to make a fool of me? Well, I'm going to take control, and I'm going to make myself as big a fool as possible. And it made an impression. People enjoyed it.
It definitely did. I think, another one that made a massive impression on me was Headcheese. Obviously, you and Steve Blackman, that kind of thing. What was it like working with Steve? I love the kind of the classic odd couple thing of that, where he just wasn't having any of it, but you'd look, like you're in the time of your life. How was it working with Steve and doing that kind of tag gimmick?
Oh, Steve was awesome. Steve was such a great guy, such a wonderful person. And it worked so great because he was such a great straight man. Because I would do things, and that's what really comes across and what really connects is what's real. And I would purposely try to drive him nuts, and come up with things that would push his buttons and, watch him get frustrated, at my antics. And that came across, on TV. And the vignettes and things that we did, on SmackDown, they turned out to be the highest rated, some of the highest rated segments on the show at that time. The viewership would go up whenever we would come on with those little vignettes. So, it was again, nothing negative, just always positive. He was, just a great guy to work with, we had our own comedy show. We had our own entertaining show, but it was broke up in 3 or 4 vignettes across 2 hours, And, we had, it was a blast. People really enjoyed us as a team, I think.
I loved it. It was great.
Yeah, no, it's definitely one of the ones that stuck with us,
Yeah, I know there was talk about us having a run with the tag titles for, a short time, but, politics being what it is, it didn't work out.
Shame.
So there was obviously eventually a bit of controversy around Head, and obviously supposedly depicting violence against women. To the point that supermarkets were removing action figures, and eventually they sort of removed Head from the gimmick. So I just wanted to sort of ask how you
I've always been ahead of the curve. I was getting canceled before cancel culture was a thing. It's so funny because there are, 2 women who were, of all things, they were professors of communications at a college in Georgia. So let's put this in perspective. 2 women that were professors of communications at a college in Georgia. Communications. So they, if anybody, should have known, hey, before we espouse our opinion in a public forum, maybe we should do a little bit of homework and some research and find out what it is we're really talking about. Nah, why would you do that? Let's just do what we always do as a society around the world, and that's jump to conclusions and presumptions, and then stomp around and make it seem like we really know what we're talking about. So they wrote a letter to the Atlanta Constitution after they had seen my action figure on the shelves in Walmart here in the United States, and proclaimed, and I quote, that my action figure was a training manual for future spousal abusers. So imagine, you're I don't know how old you are right now, but back in the day, you bought my action figure as a child, and you've had a hard day at work, and you come home, and your wife makes macaroni and cheese again, and you're like, God damn it, Carol, I've had enough of that. And you just start slapping her, going, now Snow's action figure was right. He taught me the way to handle women. And that's absurd. I mean, if you're beating your wife, my action figure is not the problem. Maybe it's your parents and how they raised you. That's probably the problem. So, it just was ridiculous. But I mean, it made me a national and international news event for about a week and a half. And unfortunately, we just didn't capitalize on it at the time, which I think we could have really done. If we'd really wanted to, but still ridiculous. It's absurd. It's just as
crazy to draw conclusions based on just, she said.
Like I say, it's clearly out of context.
It was social media before there was social media.
Yeah.
They just had to write an actual handwritten letter and then get the newspaper to publish it, and then everybody freaked out and panicked and took them off the shelf. Like, oh my God.
Yeah. Well, I mean, obviously, as a result of that, Heads obviously ended up getting replaced by the lovable Chihuahua Pepper, which I think a lot of people.
I don't know if that was around the same time or not. No, I don't remember.
Was it not kind of like literally?
I don't know.
A couple of months after.
No, I don't think so. I don't know.
No,
not sure. And that was just so you guys know, that wasn't the only controversy that I had. There was a college where we ran a show as in ECW, and there was a promo photo of me with the head in front of me, and I was holding the base of the head, like this in front of my chest, so that you could get the photo. And a women's group picketed the show, saying that my picture on the poster was portraying violence against women. And again, ahead of the curve. If anyone ever actually were to pay attention, you'd notice that I always refer to Head as they, them, us, we, because Head had multiple personalities. So you would not ever refer to one of them. You'd have to refer to all of them. And I never treated Head as anything but androgynous, but they just assumed that, I was, and then of course, because I was holding the base, it looked like I was choking the head, which incites violence against women, which is absurd. So,
well, again, it's I suppose a reaction to an image rather than knowing anything about the character that we've seen on TV.
Well, we don't have to do that, we can just jump to conclusions, and then we can.
Who needs context?
We can put our opinions out there in the public forum because it triggered us, it offended us.
Yeah.
Well, so in terms of Pepper, so I'm not too sure in terms of the timelines, but something that some of our kind of followers wanted us to ask you was, how does it feel, obviously, with the Big Boss Man kind of thing, where ultimately Boss Man ended up, feeding Pepper to you and stuff like that? It still look back on as one of the kind of most memorable moments from the Attitude Era. Was that something you guys knew would be the case, or was it just kind of a throwaway segment that you just thought wouldn't gain traction?
No, I mean, just back to what you were originally talking about, the timeline with the Head and Pepper to replace Head. It wasn't that. When Russo came to me and with the whole idea, he approached me because he had been inspired by watching the Son of Sam movie, and the killer in the movie had, thought that the dog Chihuahua was speaking to him, telling him to kill people. And that was the idea, was that I would be speaking to Pepper like I did the Head. And if I truly was schizophrenic with the transference disorder, then the Head just represents wherever I'm hearing the voices. So the dog, Pierre, the deer head,
Yeah.
all of those things would, a mop bucket, a stick, anything a lamp could be the next thing that I fixate on, and they laid it all out. He didn't, it wasn't until we got to near to the actual vignettes that we filmed where Bossman fed me the dog, which that was inspired by apparently a story Mr. Fuji, who had a neighbor who had a dog that he hated because it barked all the time. When the neighbor went to work, he kidnapped the dog and apparently killed the dog, and then invited the neighbor over for dinner and fed him his own dog. So that inspired that incident with Bossman and I. So
wow,
crazy. It's safe, memorable.
Yeah.
So obviously you've been training other wrestlers for decades now. I believe it was 95 you were first operating Body Slammers in Ohio. So I just want to ask, did you always know that you sort of wanted to sort of get involved in the training side of things?
Well, I didn't always know.
Mm.
I just kind of knew that, it was kind of another situation where I just took the bull by the horns, and I knew that if I wanted to get anywhere, I had to just do it myself, type of thing.
Of course, yeah.
And at first, I think training the other wrestlers was a means to an end, and then it became, as years went by, and more that I trained and developed were successful. I kind of realized that was probably going to be really my real legacy in the business, is the number of young men and women that I've brought up and have helped to go on to any kind of success within the wrestling business.
Yeah. One of the names that got brought up that we weren't aware of, is it true that you had a part in training Dan Severn? And if so, how was he obviously transitioned from MMA to the pro wrestling world?
Training Dan was interesting. A lot of, every type of fighting, and professional wrestling is really is a style of fighting. It's catch wrestling is what it is. Mm-hmm. It's the precursor to modern day MMA is what it is. Mm-hmm. It's been kind of bastardized and changed up over the years, but ultimately that's really what it is. Catch wrestling is where you catch a hold and you're allowed to do submissions and things like that, along with pinfalls. And usually when you get a person who's so ingrained in amateur wrestling or that style of footwork, timing, and distance, it's tough for them to adapt, because the only thing that is not real in professional wrestling, and I've said this on numerous interviews, the only thing that is not real, the only thing that we're trying to convince you of is the outcome, is the finish. Our intent behind everything we do. Everything we do is physically quite real. It's just the intent behind it. We're not doing it to per se win. We're doing it to per se portray the idea that we're trying to win. And when we're having something done to us, we're trying to portray the idea that if we have it done to us again, we might cause us to lose. That's all we're doing. And that's all you're really, besides who we are, that's what you're really wanting to believe in is our intent. So it's hard when they've got it so ingrained in them to shift those gears from actual intent of performing the moves to try to win to trying to just sell the idea that they're doing that. And it's a tough transition for a lot of them. Dan did better than most, but I knew that at the time there was a company that had opened up in Japan, was UWFI, that was enjoying an incredible amount of success. And I knew that Dan was tailor-made for the company, and I knew that he would have a real good chance to have a real strong run there with his background and everything. And he did go over and did do well. He didn't become the star that I thought he could, because he still hadn't quite. Even in that, you still had to sell the intent. But then he wanted to pursue the UFC, which was a completely different animal back then. It had only just begun. I think it was UFC 1 and 2, and he was trying to get into 3 and failed. And a wonderful woman that was kind of like a manager for a lot of us, and a den mother, Phyllis Lee, was able to get Dan in UFC 4, and then I worked with Dan and trained him and prepared him, which, I mean, we didn't know what we were doing and what we were getting into, because it's not like it is now. Back then, every fighter fought a unique style. If Dan wrestled, and you had to fight 3 fights in a row. And, the first fight he fought was a Muay Thai guy. The second guy who fought was a long style karate. And the third guy was jiu-jitsu, so not everybody, the Muay Thai guy didn't have a ground game. You might be against a Kung Fu guy. You might be against a sumo guy. You might be against a boxer. It was literally what style is the best style of fighting. And whereas now, MMA has become its own style. You've got both stand-up ground game. They've got strengths and weaknesses, but they're adept at pretty much all around. Where back then, and you're fighting an individual fighter that you can watch tapes on and research and get background and see their strengths and their weaknesses. We didn't know who he was fighting when we showed up. We didn't know if he was going to fight once, 3 times. We didn't know nothing, and it was. What an experience it was, that's for sure.
Can imagine. So you were heavily involved in Tough Enough. You mentioned it sort of briefly before. So I just wondered if you would sort of talk a little bit on sort of how that concept came about and what your thoughts were on the show, really.
Well, Tough Enough is probably one of the things I'll be very, very proud of in my career. And my time on there and the people that I helped, and I think it'll be it was during a time when reality television wasn't as prevalent. We only had, in the United States, we had Survivor, and we had Real World on MTV. That was it. And we were the very first reality television show that kind of combine the 2 elements together of taking the competition of Survivor and the Real World, where young people lived in the house, and then they now have to compete for to achieve a dream or a goal. And it was what a marvelous and amazing experience it was, all the way around. I mean, just one of the great times of my career, really was. And as far as exposure and as far as recognition and recognizability, I mean, I couldn't have wanted something more or better than what I had gotten on MTV at that period of time.
Yeah, got very fond memories of that show. I remember watching all the kind of seasons, so yeah, absolutely loved it. You spent a lot of time over here in the UK. I think you even opened up a wrestling school over here as well as one point. So I was just wondering what your thoughts are on the UK wrestling fans compared to all the other places you've wrestled.
Well, I love the UK. I have been over there a lot. And I still have the Al Snow Wrestling Academy in the Midlands and just outside of London and Surrey. There were a couple more, but they, with COVID and everything, they didn't survive. Yeah. But and then one still in Romania, couple in Chile, and I love the UK fans. I mean, I'll tell you, they're some of the most boisterous and vocal, and probably outside of Philadelphia's ECW arena, I can't imagine a more fun crowd, more fun audience to perform in front of than the UK fans. Seriously.
Hell of a compliment.
So obviously you're now operating OVW. So first, I just want to ask: is there still a connection between OVW and WWE today? And secondly, is
there's no direct connection between OVW and WWE. No, there is no direct connection. There hasn't been for quite some time, but still kind of connected. Insofar as the fact that I'm there, I operate it, I oversee everything. They always take an interest in what their former superstars are doing, and of course, it's the track record of OVW speaks for itself, and
of course,
a large part of that track record was when I was there with the developmental, and both with WWE and Impact, and so my track record of people that I have trained that have went on to become stars in the wrestling business speaks for itself as well.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Absolutely. Obviously you've trained a lot of wrestlers, so over your time, what is there any former students that you would say that you were like the most proud of, that you've had the privilege to train, and is there any kind of the current crop that you're really excited for people to get to see more of?
Well, sure there are, but I don't want to mention names because here's what's going to happen. I'm proud of them all. I sincerely am, but if I mention or point out or pick a name or two or ones of the current roster, and I don't mention somebody else, then it's going to be like, hey, what's going on? I suck. What's going on? It's wrestlers are notoriously insecure, and even though I'm probably would have, if you spoke to me on another day, I'd probably mention their name and not the one that I mentioned, and so to avoid all of that, let's just say that I think again, I really am proud of all of my kids that I have been involved with and taught and developed to any degree. And, if I didn't have faith and belief in the current roster, then I certainly wouldn't have bought the company in 2018 and still be with it today, beating my head against the wall, so.
Yeah, no, that's fair. So one thing I'd like to ask is, do you watch much of the current product today? And if so, is there
I don't get much of an opportunity to, because I'm so heavily involved with OVW. Like, I would explain that to a lot of people years ago that, this man doesn't see you, doesn't know about you until you are in his ring, because he doesn't watch anything else, because his sole focus is what he's doing, not what anybody else is doing. Yeah. And that, it's not because he doesn't like it or he doesn't, enjoy watching it. It's because, that's what it should be. What should be is his sole focus is what he does. Well, that's kind of what it's become for me, is that
makes
I
sense.
I don't really get much of a chance to watch, just because of time constraints and the amount of responsibility and etc. that it takes to run even a wrestling promotion on this level, a weekly ongoing concern. It takes a lot. I mean, just for instance, today, I've been working throughout the day. I'm going, once we finish this interview, I'm going to go to the arena. I've got to film a pre-tape for tomorrow night's TV. Last week, Monday night, I filmed 4 vignettes of 2 wrestlers that were on a date. A referee and a wrestler, a female wrestler, were on a date for TV. Yesterday, talent weren't available, but I was supposed to film more pre-tapes that were for tomorrow. That's all the work during the day, and then all of that filming that I have to do Monday night, Tuesday night, Wednesday night. And then tomorrow will be a 12 to 14 hour day of producing 2 hours of live television, And then
it's absolutely insane. I mean, it leads me on to my next question. I actually had here in my notes is that we know you're just one of the busiest people in wrestling. So taking all that you've just said, you've got so many other, different endeavors you're involved in. So we wanted to just touch on a couple of them briefly. So firstly, Collar and Elbow. So you've kind of got your own wrestling apparel brand. How did that come about?
My partner, Rod Hicks, approached me several years ago and, had this idea, which was, and at that time wasn't a lot of, what was happening was that a lot of the wrestling merchandise or t-shirts were, they were uncomfortable Gildan heavy bulletproof shirts. And then they usually had like a guy's face plastered all over it. You know what I mean? They weren't very cool. They didn't really say, and if I'm a guy, I don't want another guy's face on my chest.
Fair.
And or even just a picture of him doing some wrestling move or something. I don't want it. So we talked about the fact that we wanted to come up with designs that on shirts that were comfortable and that like you went out of your way to wear them because you liked them, the way they felt and the way they fit, and that we wanted designs that just were cool. And if you weren't a wrestling fan, you might just look at the design on the shirt and be like, oh, that's cool, I like that. But if you were a wrestling fan, there was something on it in the design that spoke to you, that if another wrestling fan saw it, they knew it was a wrestling shirt. But if you wore it out and a non-wrestling fan saw it, then you didn't have to deal with, oh, you're a wrestling fan, that was fake, right? And you're like, hey, congratulations, Murder, She Wrote. How long did it take you to put the clues together, Angela Lansbury? Incredible detective work that you've ascertained something that everyone's known for decades.
Yeah,
your skills of deduction are amazing, jackass. Magic's not real too, you turd. So that kind of but if you wear a shirt that speaks to another wrestling fan, but it's just a cool design and other people just think it's a cool design, that's what we were trying to endeavor to do. And so I thought that was a really cool idea, and I thought it was a great way to go about it, so
that's how we say it's something a bit different as well.
Yeah.
So another one we'd like to mention is you have your own comic book series, The Adventures of Al Snow and Head. So I'm going to ask how that came about and what it's like to have your own comic.
Well, that's freaking awesome to have my own comic. That is what it's like. Eric Watkins with Broken Icon Comics approached me about wanting to do a comic book, and the concept for the story it's great because, again, it lends itself to the character in wrestling. These comics, I know that there have been comics out and they're very wrestling centric in the sense that it all takes part in a round arena or it takes part in a ring or, all of that. These are not anything like that. Like the first one, which was a 40-page book, the Ballad of Al Snow and Head. That one is a story where it takes place in a post-apocalyptic world, and where I believe that I run a detective agency. Head and I do, and over here that a barmaid has lost her heart, meaning she fell in love, but I think somebody stole her heart, like legitimately. And so I go set about wanting to solve the case in this post-apocalyptic world and get her heart back for her. In The Adventures of Al Snow and Head, it's the ballad is one. So like the first ballad is a post-apocalyptic world. The second one is where I think that I'm a Secret Service agent and I'm trying to infiltrate the enemy to the north, which is Canada. So I'm sneaking into Canada and trying to thwart an evil empire. And the great thing is that all of these can take place because they all take place here in my addled brain, and none of it's real. The Adventures of Alan Snow and Head are kind of like the old Marvel team up books, where I'll team up with different wrestling superstars. So like, we've already had one issue out that was with Chavo Guerrero Jr. It was it's an old West adventure. And you know, Chavo's riding Pepe the stick horse, you know, in the adventure. And I'm, of course, I have had, and Pepper is in there, and so's Pierre. And they're all very true to the wrestling characters. They're just in different settings. So this one that's out right now on BrokenIconComics.com, there's a Kickstarter for Adventures of Al Snow and Head with Big Brother fame Jesse Goddard's, and it's set back like in the 30s and 40s in a carnival, old carnival days. And I introduce an army of little people that are all dressed like former gimmicks of mine that are all at my command, and I have them attack people at random. And then the next one is a team up with Tommy Dreamer that is set back in like the Prohibition days with gangsters and Al Capone and all of that. And it's a little darker. And then there's one with Scotty Too Hottie where it's a little more modern, we're both assassins, and that one's really it's like John Wick and you know meets you know the Matrix type of thing. It's pretty cool, that story. You know, we've got one with Ricky Steamboat that's going to come out that's set like the Game of Thrones because he's Ricky the Dragon Steamboat. So
Nice.
you know, so there are all these different worlds. And, you know, they're all very true to who the characters really are. And they're still the wrestling characters. They're not about just a wrestling thing. And I really was flattered and impressed with and amazed with like big name talent in the comic book business are working on these books. Just amazing artists. And if you get like the ballad and you get like the Adventures of Al Snow and Head with Chavo, and then the one with Jesse Goddard's, all of the artwork's incredible, but it all has its own unique style that fits for that particular story. So they're really cool. I mean, I'm really, really flattered and really think that they're all self-contained stories. You know, it's not like you have to get it, but we're working on getting out like two more issues of the Ballad of Al Snow and Head, and then another like 4 or 5 of the Adventures of, and we'll, you know, that's when we're going to release them out into distributors and stuff when we have enough, because in the comic book world, you can't just release one. They got to know that you've got several already in the line so that they can, you know, build an audience. So
yeah, I mean, the great thing about the concept, the fact that it all takes place in your head, is the possibility that
and anything's possible. Anything's possible. You know, we have an outer space story that we're going to do, and you know, an underwater one that we're going to do. I mean, there's no end to it because I'm completely out of my mind. You know?
I love it. So
That's
cool.
awesome. Yeah.
Obviously, we'd be remiss not to mention the fact that you are, as well as a comic book hero, you are an actual hero. So it's well documented that you saved the life of a young child who's at risk of being swept out to sea. So I just wanted to touch on obviously what was going through your head just at that time.
You know, look, I just was in the right place at the right time, you know, and I think, I believe that anybody would have done the same thing. You know, I just saw him and saw him being pulled out to sea by a rip current, and you know, it was amazing and terrifying to watch, because I, you know, he caught my attention because the little boy was yelling for help and he was paddling, trying to make it back to shore, and it was as if a rope had been tied to his ankle and was just pulling him out. I mean, and he was picking up speed, and I kind of looked around and nobody was moving, and I was quite a ways away, and I just took off, kind of running and half swimming through the water. And you know, thank God. I mean, I caught him. I mean, I literally caught him by the wrist, because I knew if I hadn't caught him at that point, I mean, he was gone. He was going to be well past where anybody could have got to him, you know. And I grabbed him and pulled him to me, and as I did, the rip current caught me, and a wave came over top of us, and I know at that moment, and because earlier, I don't forget how long it's ago, but Shad Gaspard had passed away the same way, saving his son, and I thought for sure we were both at that moment. I thought we were both going to get swept out, but thank God I dug my feet in and was able to push forward and out of the pool of the rip current, and I was able to pass him off to the lifeguard and get him to shore, and he was okay. So we both made it out all right, but it got a little dicey for a second. My butthole pinched shut for a brief moment, that's for sure.
Wow. Well, no, it's an absolutely, obviously not a situation anyone wants to find themselves in, but an absolutely amazing story. I think both Carl and I are parents, and it sort of gets you when you hear something like that. And, absolutely amazing what you did. And,
anybody would have done the same thing. So it's nothing that special. So.
So you've obviously you've also recently partnered with MadCat Beard Care.
Yes.
And the purchases, you're supporting animal rescue and stray cats, sort of as part of that. So just wondered if you could tell us a little bit about this new venture, really. And they make beard care products and men's skincare, and he uses the proceeds that the profits and stuff that he derives from the sale of the products. He donates to animal shelters to help with rescuing, stray animals. So, there are a lot of terrible animals that are out there living in terrible conditions, and if there's a way that we can do anything to kind of help them, and if I can, use my little bit of notoriety that I still have left to help out, and so be it. I'm all about that. That's awesome.
And I've got some great. I don't have a beard anymore; I just have the goatee now. But boy, the stuff that he gave me, they sent me, it smells amazing. So my wife likes it, so that's why I keep wearing it. I keep putting it on all the time because I'm like, maybe if I keep rubbing enough of this on me, I'll get lucky. So
love it. I'll listen. We could talk your ear off absolutely all day. But one of the last ones, obviously we know how busy you are. You've undergone a hell of a body transformation. Like, you are looking jacked. So, just wanted to ask, obviously, what brought on the transformation?
Contrary to popular belief, it's not because I love how everybody go, you on steroids and all that. And if I was, I don't care. I don't care if somebody does that. It doesn't mean anything to me. But what people don't understand about, if they'd actually do homework on steroids, they realize all it does is allow you to recover quicker and more expediently. That's all it does. In order to get there, though, you have to still put in the work, and you have to do it the right way. And that, for me, for a lot of years, was where I went wrong. And I tell people all the time, one day I Googled George Hackenschmidt, who was an old, late 1800s, early 1900s professional wrestler and strongman, and Great Gama, who was a world-renowned professional wrestler. And I went down that rabbit hole and started researching, because if you go and look at the pictures of these guys, they look amazing. And this is during a time where there were no such thing as steroids. Yeah. And they didn't know what even a calorie was, let alone what protein was or carbohydrates. They didn't know any of that stuff. So I was like, how did they look like that? I'm going to start training like that. And that's what I did. I started doing more functional, more compound movements, adopted the mindset that I was not any longer just training, lifting heavy weights, but that I was actually practicing, much like you would any other sport, the technique of doing it the right way. And then really got involved in a lot of the older techniques and development that they used to do and equipment. I've got a Shina board. It's a push-up board that the old Palawani wrestlers would use to train with. I haven't done bench press in God knows how many years. It's just not it's great, but it's really primarily just an ego lift. When are you in your life going to lay flat on your back and do this unless you're underneath your car and the jack stand falls out? And I started using gadas, Indian maces, and Persian clubs, and Persian meals and joris, and I train with those and kettlebells and do a lot of compound lifts, a lot with my legs and with my back. And that was one of the biggest takeaways was, the main, there's an amazing website, and I don't know if it's still up or not. At the time that I found it, it was called goldenageofstrongmen.com, and it's a UK website. And at the time, they had the actual training manuals that some of these old wrestlers and Indian athleticism and training ideas and practices and techniques, and you could actually download those training manuals.
That's awesome.
And so I spent a lot of time, going through and reading and those training manuals and those techniques, and adopted that style, changed my diet and started doing those things, and that is what led to that. And I think I was a late developer, a late bloomer, honestly, like a really late bloomer. And I think as I got older and my muscle got more mature and developed more, but also I think the techniques that I used to train, like, I learned, the biggest takeaway was that if you worked out 3 days a week, you focused on your legs, your back, and your hands. Those were the 3 components: legs, back, and hands. And if you only had 2 days, it was legs and back. If it was only 1 day, it's legs, because legs are the absolute essential thing that will take you to transforming your body. In fact, I had a conversation with he's a strength coach he was the Olympic volleyball team's strength coach in China. And he was from America. And he said that here in the United States, the university, they had done a study. They took 3 groups of people, and I think it was in like a 90-day period of time. And they took a group A, and group A was to only train their upper body intensely, but train their upper body. Group B was to train only the lower body. And then group C was to train both their upper and their lower body. And what they found after the 90 days was that Group A had a minimal amount of muscle gain and fat loss from head to toe. Group C, the group that worked both upper and lower body, had a slightly more amount of muscle mass increase and fat loss than Group A, that just worked their upper body. But the one that had the most from head to toe muscle mass increase and fat loss was the group that worked their lower body exclusively intensely. So, the more I adopted those principles, the more it allowed me to develop. So
that's fascinating. So it shows you it's not always what you expect. As you think working both would be the key one, wouldn't you? But
definitely don't skip leg day.
Don't skip leg day.
Don't skip leg day, and don't just do it once a week. Pursue it and do it. And if you want to be a wrestler, train to be a wrestler. Don't train to be a bodybuilder. That's a different style. My wife was a competitive bodybuilder, and the way that she trains is completely different than the way I train. Completely. Wow. She's going for, where she's chiseling, shaping, molding, and I'm going for, something completely different. So
yeah. Fascinating stuff. So obviously, as I say, you're incredibly busy, so we'll let you go shortly. But lastly, I just thought I'd ask if you could sort of let everyone, all the viewers or listeners, know how they can sort of keep up to date with everything you're doing in terms of social medias or projects you got going on.
Sure, yeah. If anybody wants to follow me on social media, on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, I think that's it. You can go at the real Al Snow, because there were some fakes, and that was before I was verified. And even if you do fake me now, I'm just going to send a message to you and go like, aim the bar higher. I mean, what are you doing? If you want to follow me on Facebook, you can go to Al Snow, or my fan page, which is the real Al Snow as well, on Facebook. And if you're interested in OVW, I know in the UK you can watch it on Fight. We do live weekly television every Thursday night from 7 to 9 p.m. live on Fight, but you can always catch the replay on Fight anytime you want in the UK. And if you have interest in OVW, you can go to ovwrestling.com. If you're interested in OVW, in the academy, our training school here in OVW is the only actually accredited by a state office of proprietary education as an actual trade school for professional wrestling, sports entertainment, and broadcasting in the world. You can go to ovwacademy.com for more information about that as well. And if you want to check out my book that I wrote, it's on amazon.com, and it's self-help life lessons from the bizarre career of professional wrestling and Al Snow. So
awesome.
Be sure to check that out.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. Genuinely, we massively appreciate you taking the time. We know how busy you are. So thanks again.
Thank you guys very much. I really do appreciate it. I wish you nothing but the best of luck.